Welcome again. In this session, we are going to be reading from John chapter 10, verses 1 through 21. What Jesus is talking about here seems to be quite mysterious to a lot of people. We're going to be digging deep into this, and we're going to be talking about what Jesus really meant when he was talking about the Good Shepherd, about the hireling, the hired hand. The title of this is Good Shepherd, Bad Shepherd. Is your pastor hired? Okay? Now, the reason why I said, is your pastor hired? Because the word shepherd and pastor means the same thing, okay? Like today, in most Protestant churches today, we have pastors, okay? And so the word pastor means shepherd. So a pastor of a church is basically a shepherd of the sheep. So this is what Jesus is talking about. So we need to read this, we need to understand this, and we need to take this seriously. Let's get right into this. This is John chapter 10, verse 1. Most certainly I tell you, says Jesus, one who doesn't enter by the door into the sheepfold, but climbs up some other way, is a thief and a robber. But one who enters in by the door is the shepherd of the sheep. The gatekeeper opens the gate for him, and the sheep listen to his voice. He calls his own sheep by name and leads them out. Whenever he brings out his own sheep, he goes before them. In other words, he goes in front of them. And the sheep follow him, for they know his voice. They will by no means follow a stranger, but will flee from him, for they don't know the voice of strangers. Jesus spoke this parable to them, but they didn't understand what he was telling them. Now, before we get into Jesus' explanation about what he meant here, I need to talk about how Jesus said that his sheep will hear his voice. Now, in the charismatic / Pentecostal world today, and actually beyond that, in many Christian circles today, we have a lot of people who claim to hear the voice of the Lord. And one of the passages that they rely on is, well, my sheep hear my voice. And this is the whole thing in John chapter 10. But you need to realize, okay, the truth of the matter is, now Jesus does still speak to his people today. God still does speak to his people today, mostly through the scriptures, okay? Notice I say mostly, because yes, he does speak to people still directly as he did throughout the generations, throughout the ages. But today we have the scriptures. And today we also have a lot of people seeking a word of the Lord. It's almost like people going to psychic fairs, today, or people looking for some kind of fortune teller, okay? This is a very dangerous place to be. You have over 1,000 pages sitting in front of you when you have the Bible sitting in front of you. Why would you be seeking some other place to get some other word that's extra biblical? And a lot of these people who seek a word, from God, an extra biblical word, what I mean by extra biblical, something that the Bible doesn't directly tell you, like, well, should I go for this job, or should I go this direction in my life? And there's nothing wrong in seeking the Lord's guidance in this, in this way. However, there is a problem that we have in many Christian circles today, where people are just taking this to the extreme. It's like Noah. Did he ask God about every nail that he used to build the ark? Which nail do you want me to use now, Lord? It can be taken to the extreme, okay? And a lot of people do that today. So why should we be seeking an extra biblical word from God when we got the Bible right in front of us? Let's get into the Bible first. Let's get this down first. Let's not just read it. Let's not just understand it, because number one, you got to read it. Number two, you got to understand it. And number three, you've got to apply it to your life. You have to obey it. Some people don't even get to the first step. And if they get to the first step, they don't get to the second step. And if they get to the second step, very, very few people ever get to the third step. So we need to obey it. A lot of people who seek a word from the Lord apart from what we have in the Bible, because, there are people today that's like, well, let's not get, we're not into the word now, we're into the Spirit. So let's close the Bible and let's just get into the Spirit. That is a very, very dangerous place. And that's actually a very unbiblical and very heretical place to be. Jesus rebuked people time and time again. Haven't you read? Don't you know this? Haven't you read the scriptures? Don't you know what the scriptures say about this? Like, he rebuked people over and over and over again for not reading and not understanding the scriptures. So he expects people to read and understand the scriptures. I mean, we got the book of Deuteronomy, we got the book of Revelation. Clearly say, blessed are those who read this book and those who do it, those who obey it, those who keep the words of this prophecy. So we need to read. We need to read the scriptures. We need to get into the scriptures. Again, I want to make it clear. I'm not saying that it's wrong to get another, a word from God apart from the Bible. However, we need to be very careful that we read, understand, and obey the Bible, the Holy Scriptures, first and foremost, okay? Little side note here. A lot of these Christians who look for a word from God apart from the Bible, they completely condemn any book that's extra biblical, any apocryphal book or any other, piece of sacred literature such as the book of Jasher or the book of Enoch, these kind of things. They completely condemn that. Oh, no, we're not going to read any of that. We're not going to even read it. Well, even though that's not in your Bible, you seek words of God that is not in your Bible. Hey, there's hypocrisy there. You know what I'm saying? There's double standard hypocrisy. So getting back to the story, Jesus here very clearly laid out a parable to his disciples. His disciples didn't quite understand what he was talking about. Let's get into Jesus further expounding upon this whole principle. Good shepherd, the thief that comes to kill, steal, and destroy. Verse 7, Jesus therefore said to them again, most certainly I tell you, I am the sheep's door. All who came before me are thieves and robbers, but the sheep didn't listen to them. I am the door. If anyone enters in by me, he will be saved and will go in and go out and will find pasture. The thief only comes to steal, kill, and destroy. I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd. The good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. I'm going to stop here for a second because Jesus makes a point here. The good shepherd really, really sacrifices himself for the sheep, okay? Really, really cares for the sheep. Again, the word shepherd here and the word pastor are interchangeable. They're synonymous, okay? So you might say, well, I go to church and I have a good pastor. Well, you're saying you have a good shepherd. Is your pastor a kind of person that would lay down his life for you? Good question. Let's read on. He who is a hired hand and not a shepherd, who doesn't own the sheep, sees the wolf coming, leaves the sheep and flees. The wolf snatches the sheep and scatters them. The hired hand flees because he is a hired hand and doesn't care for the sheep. Now, Jesus here makes it very clear. There is a clear distinction between a good shepherd and a hired hand, okay? A hired hand is someone who is hired, an employee, but the shepherd is not someone who's hired. They shepherd the sheep because they truly, truly love the sheep with all their being. They're willing to sacrifice their life for the sheep. Whereas the hired hand, they're doing what they do because, well, that's their job. And the hired hand, if they really, really see trouble coming, they're going to flee. Now, I heard a story. Now, some of you may have heard this before. Now, this is a story that has its background in a overseas nation. And in this nation, there's a lot of Christian persecution. There's a lot of persecution against Christians. Christianity is outlawed, and the government and the police are out to seek and to kill Christians, okay? So there was a church who met privately, secretly, in a secret location. And they met in this building and they locked the doors whenever they would have church, whenever they had their church service. They locked the doors because they thought, well, we don't want anybody coming in here that's not people that we know, because, they can be, soldiers or policemen that would come in here, arrest us, or even kill us. So they would lock the doors every time they would have a church service. So one day they were having church and they locked the doors, and not long after they started their service, all of a sudden a knock came at the door, and they didn't answer because they didn't know whether that was police or soldiers that were coming to get them. They didn't answer the door. Well, within a few minutes, all of a sudden, bang at the door, bang at the door. These people were trying to break in the door, break down the doors, okay? And within a very short time, they did break in the doors. And, lo and behold, it was soldiers, armed soldiers. And they drew their guns and they pointed their guns at the people and they said, those of you who are willing to renounce Jesus, those of you who are willing to renounce Christ, leave right now. And your act of leaving the church, your act of leaving this building is your way of saying, I denounce Jesus. I denounce the Messiah. And so all the people, not everybody, but almost everybody, run for the door, run for their lives. And after they all ran out, there was a few people left. And these people were vehemently against renouncing Jesus. They said, no matter what you guys do to us, we are never going to renounce Jesus. We are never going to renounce our Messiah. Here we are. Kill us now. If you're here to kill us, we're ready to die for Jesus. And those soldiers, they shut the doors again. They locked the doors again, and they put their guns down. And the people who were left, the very few people that were left, were like, what are you guys doing? What's going on? Aren't you going to kill us? And they said, no, we're not going to kill you. We're Christians too. We just want to worship with real Christians. Let's get on with the service. So once again, Jesus said here in verse 13, the hired hand flees because he's a hired hand and doesn't care for the sheep. I am the good shepherd. I'm the good pastor. I know my own, and I'm known by my own. Now, again, I have to stop here for a second because, you see, Jesus identified himself as the good pastor, the good shepherd, okay? A lot of people would say, well, are you going to come to my church? Why don't you come to my church? Well, my church is having, a special event this evening or, next weekend. My church. Or a pastor might say, come to my church. It's not your church, okay? If it is your church, if that church belongs to you, it's not the true church. Jesus said, I am the good shepherd. I am the good pastor. If you go to a church, you need to make sure that your church is led by and run by people who say, it's not our church. This is not our church. This is the Lord's church. This is Jesus' church. Let's never say our church. It's not. It belongs to Jesus, and we're here to follow Jesus. We're here to follow the words of the Lord to the best of our ability and not our own church bylaws or our own church rules or regulations or our own church programs. We're here for one purpose and one purpose only. That is to worship and serve and obey God. Verse 15, Jesus continued by saying, even as the Father knows me and I know the Father, I lay down my life for the sheep. Notice that's a stark contrast to the hired hand who doesn't. Verse 16, I have other sheep which are not of this fold. I must bring them also, that they will hear my voice, and they will become one flock with one shepherd. You might say, what is Jesus talking about here? He said he has other sheep. Other sheep here refers to the Gentiles, okay? Those who will be grafted into the Jewish vine, okay? He said, I have other sheep which are not of this fold, okay? So right now they're Gentiles, but they will be grafted in. They will come into the Jewish fold, and they will become one with the Jewish people. That's what Jesus is talking about. Therefore, the Father loves me because I lay down my life that I might take it again. There Jesus is talking about resurrection. No one takes it away from me, but I lay it down by myself. I have power to lay it down, and I have power to take it again. I received this commandment from my Father. See, a lot of people today, they would say, well, the Jews, they're the Christ killers. They're the ones that killed Jesus. No, that's not what Jesus said, okay? In fact, it's the Jews who gave us the word of God. It is the Jews who gave us the Messiah, the Jewish Messiah, Yeshua. It's the Jews who gave us the Bible, okay? Every disciple was a Jew, okay? Every author of the Bible was a Jew, including Paul himself. They were all Jews, okay? Jesus never said, oh, it's the Jews, they're the Christ killers. So don't ever say that. Jesus says, nobody takes my life from me. I lay it down of my own accord, okay? I lay it down in accordance to the commandment of my Father. No one has the power to take my life, the life of the Son of God. No one can take my life. I lay it down by myself. Therefore, a division arose again among the Jews because of these words. Many of them said, he has a demon and is insane. Why do you listen to him? Others said, these are not the sayings of one possessed by a demon. It isn't possible for a demon to open the eyes of the blind, is it? So here again, we have division among the Jews. Some of them fiercely opposed Yeshua by saying, he has a demon, he's crazy, okay? Again, if you preach like Jesus, okay, which really you're supposed to, what would Jesus do? You're supposed to take Jesus as your example, especially you pastors who are listening to me. If you preach like Jesus, people will call you crazy and demon-possessed, okay? Because look at the way Jesus preached. Check out my other teachings about how Jesus preached, okay? I mean, check out the last teaching I did there on John chapter 8, the last half of John chapter 8. I mean, Jesus preached very, very hard and very, very aggressive against the people, okay? So if you preach the way Jesus preached, you will have people calling you demon-possessed. You will have people calling you crazy. And by the way, pastor, by the way, preacher, by the way, Christian, if you don't have people calling you crazy or demon-possessed, then you better check whether or not you are really doing what Jesus did, really talking the way Jesus taught, really taking Jesus as your example. And so we have division again among the Jews. Some of the Jews believed in Jesus, say, how can he be evil if he does the works that he did? Others said he's crazy and demon-possessed, okay? So there you have it. Good shepherd, bad shepherd. Is your pastor a hired hand? May these words that were spoken today be enriched to you by the Spirit of God. May the Spirit of God enrich you by opening your eyes, opening your understanding to what the words we were talking about in this session really mean. May God give you great understanding as you call upon Him and as you seek Him. May He show you great and mighty things. Once again, thanks for listening, and God bless you abundantly.